On this episode of the show, I have with me Michael Topol. He is co-founder and co-CEO at MGT Insurance, and we're going to be talking about doing more with the data you have. And a lot of times now, leaders are much more functional than they were before, and enabling technology to be delivered within an industry such as insurance takes a lot. It's a big industry, and innovation is something that will differentiate. We'll talk to Michael about that. We'll talk a little bit about what AI culture looks like, and the vibe coding as well. And we got a whole host of other things we'll try to get to. But Michael, I appreciate the time.
Of course. Great to be with you, Amir. Happy Wednesday.
Yeah, likewise. All right. Before we start, MGT Insurance, what do you guys do over there?
That's a great question. So we are a fully verticalized AI and agentic native insurance company. And we like to call that a neo-insurer. So what does that mean? Neo-insurer, we kind of think about it as, old school meets new school. So bringing the best in class insurance professionals and partnering them and pairing them with world-class technology professionals and the tools and systems and data to make better decisions at the right time with the right information.
Absolutely. I guess we're talking about insurance products, insurance companies, the insurance industry. I guess typically when people look at it from the outside looking in, insurance is normally not maybe what is considered cutting edge. You guys are doing some really interesting things. I guess when we think about insurance and we think about the growth and emergence of companies, products like you, AI Neo Insurer. What is it that's shifted that allows you to leverage some of these advanced technologies and tackle some products and areas that previously were just not open?
I think that's a really great question. And, I think you implicit in there have sort of two questions, which is, one of your statements was insurance is something that people oftentimes don't think about, and it's an old school industry. And what I'd say to that is, in fact, it is an old school industry. It's been around, whether it's 500 years from the Venetians or 2,000 plus years from the Phoenicians. Insurance is really a important economic and social good, which often gets forgotten about. And if you think about it, we're focused on insurance for small businesses. 35 million small businesses in this country. They're the backbone of the American economy. If you want to start a new business as an entrepreneur, if your parents were an immigrant that started a restaurant or a laundromat, or you are inheriting a family business, you can't do that. You can't be in business. You can't operate without insurance. And insurance allows people to create these businesses, create these jobs, and support their local communities and create community around them. And yet, the only way they can do that is by having insurance. So that way, then when they go home and they can sleep at night, they know that if something were to happen to their restaurant or their hardware store, they could get the insurance to help them rebuild, recover, save those jobs. And honestly save their livelihoods, because for many people, other than their homes and their families, their small businesses are their most important asset that they have that supports not only them, but their employees and their communities. And so I think oftentimes that gets forgotten in the process of insurance. And I think the reason it gets forgotten is because insurance has been around for quite a while. And, a lot of the ways in which things are and have been done the same way for 40, 50, 60, 100 plus years. And I think, so I think that's kind of what gets lost. And I think, if we think about it, now is the right time to do it, as you said, one, from a data perspective. But if you think about the other industries in the that have been sort of, call it, evolved or disrupted, right? Amazon took what was in the dot-com boom, selling the old way through brick and mortar and turning it into online. Or, Tesla said, okay, we can manufacture cars better. Ford did it, 100 years ago. DoorDash said we could, deliver differently. Stripe said, hey, payments work, right? You have Visa card, Visa, MasterCard, FIS, but how can we kind of reinvent using the modern tools and technology available at the time? And I actually think previously, the technology wasn't quite at the place where you could do that in insurance. But I think now, because of AI, LLMs, where machine learning is on big data, it is possible now to do that and build a great company in the insurance industry that is built still with the fundamentals of insurance, but built using that data ethos and that decision-making ethos from agentic and AI.
Absolutely. I guess when you look at the insurance industry, data, insurance companies are not lacking data. When we think about data and we think about the opportunity to innovate around that data, obviously there is a bit of a gap between having data and also having the technology maturity to actually action on that data. But also then you have startups that might be light on data, but then they obviously can assemble the best, the greatest on the tech side. I guess talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect question. As we think about it, you're exactly right. These insurance companies, they've been around for, as I said, 100 plus years, and they've got lots of data. But part of the issue is that their data, it's through, whether it's companies that were built a long time ago, acquisitions and roll-ups and multiple different data stacks and data silos. Most of their data is in mainframe, COBOL-based systems, if not in paper, in boxes in the basement, depending on the size of the insurance company. And the problem is that data is there, but to your point, it's not necessarily accessible or readily accessible. And so one of the things that we did early on is we built our own data stack to enable us to use the data that we have. And we're fortunate to have access to lots of data, both our own and historical data, in order to build and grow our company, to provide our insurance professionals with the right information to make the right decisions. And I think the key is making sure that that data is not just there, but is actually usable, so that way we can make better decisions. And I think that's really the differentiator from a data perspective. I also think that, if you look over the last 3 to 5 years, where machine learning, deep learning, machine learning that's been around for a little bit longer, but now with LLMs, you can use not just your internal data, but you can use readily available data on the, if you're looking at a restaurant, you can look at, okay, what do the Yelp reviews say? What does the menu say? What do the pictures show? And all of that information previously was ingested by a human who had to then try and kind of amalgamate it, write it down, synthesize it, and make a decision. And now a lot of that data gathering aspect and that synthesis can happen by machines. And then the humans can use that data to make the right decisions. And so you can take something that, we like to say we support small businesses, but in particular, we support the agents and the brokers who are serving those small businesses. Because if you were a baker opening a bakery, you didn't get in the business of baking to figure out insurance. So you call your insurance agent. And so for us, it's how do we help that insurance agent, when that baker does come to them, get the right insurance at the right time. And the way you do that is being fast and responsive. So that way you enable that agent to have, give them the confidence that we've done our homework. We understand how to underwrite this properly and provide insurance that's going to be worthwhile, but yet do it in a timely and efficient manner that allows them to be responsive to their customer.
Absolutely. I love that. I guess when we're talking about some of the advantages startups have, obviously, in regulated industries, there are some limitations you have to work with. You mentioned legacy components through acquisition, just inertia being around for so long. When we're looking at some of the tools that are coming out to the market to help delivery of actual software, I mean, there's a lot to be said around vibe coding, whatever code generating tool you're looking at out there to talk about to help deliver. For a company that's a startup, I mean, you could grab it off a shelf and start using it. There's, you control that decision. I guess when you look at the fact that within insurance things are regulated, does that change anything? I'm asking because I don't know if not everyone works in regulated industry, but within a regulated industry, are there any implications around using these code generating tools, or what does it look like actually? If you could help us understand.
Yeah, it's a great question. And, it's funny. Insurance is definitely a regulated industry, but it's not like there haven't been other startups in other parts of financial services, also highly regulated. And so I'd say insurance is sort of that last bastion where, as I mentioned, there hasn't really been a disruptor from a technology perspective. And I think one of the things I like about what you said is that as a new entrant, as a call it an innovator, technology company, you can move a little bit faster, right? You can think about what the process should look like and reimagine it. But you still have to operate within regulations and within regulatory frameworks. And so it depends on how you use it. And so, if you were thinking about internally, well, how do I get information from, system A to system B, or from my system to my underwriter or to my customer service person? That's a place where vibe coding can help a lot. Because at a traditional insurance company, you might have, 7 or 10 people across, customer service, underwriting assistant, rater, all of these different people to serve a small set of customers. Whereas for us, we're able, because of the technology, right? I can vibe code some of this stuff, have an engineer connected on the back end, and that information can flow seamlessly. So you can have one customer service person and one underwriter, where previously maybe you needed 10 and 10. And so in those instances, it's not that we're changing any of the outcomes necessarily, but we're making that process faster and more efficient and more scalable, which actually also provides a better service to our customer and the agent, which means that we can actually help them grow and scale faster, and we can scale quickly while still maintaining, good, I call it customer service results.
Absolutely. When you think about vibe coding, I've spoke to a few people about how requirements could be changing, because previously we'd have to go through discussions with the people that control technology, the doers of technology, give them that understanding, and then wait for them to come back with something. With vibe coding, most people can kind of kludge, I'll use that word kludge their way towards some further point of requirements. Then here's the words, right? Picture, code, whatever we want to talk about it. When we think about that ability for non-technologists to pick up tools like this to help generate these type of outcomes, does that change the way requirements get handed over to the engineers, or what are your thoughts there?
I think so. And I think it's going to continue to change and evolve. I think it means, though, that everyone gets closer together in some senses. And so, we've talked a little bit about this. The culture matters a lot. And when we think about how that matters, it used to be, to your point, you'd go say, what's the business decision? What are we doing? Okay. How do we give this to a product manager who's going to go think about the trade-offs from the business side versus the technical trade-offs, and scope it and take a thought, an idea, and put it into technical words, and then work with the engineering team to kind of scope that out and then build the product. And I think you're starting to collapse a lot of that process. I think the first place we've seen it, and you'll probably continue to see it, is in the product management function. I think for us, our product managers have become more technical, and much closer, call it, to the engineers, where they can design, code, get something in pretty good shape pretty quickly, and then the engineers can help take it across the board. But I also think that enables our engineers to have a better understanding and get closer to the business, because they're not just sitting there saying, oh, well, I've been told to build this, just build it. You actually now can have a conversation with a prototype that's been built by a, call it, non-engineer, that then shows them what's going on. And engineers are extremely smart, and they can then help you think through the trade-offs that need to be made on how it then gets fully implemented. And I think, product management is probably one of the first places that's going to change. But then I think across the rest of the business, that will enable people to, as you talked about, put requirements in plain English, right? Put it in the language we all communicate in, and get it pretty close where then the engineers can take that across the line. And I think even from an engineering perspective, we've got phenomenal senior level engineers, principal level engineers and above, and they are finding new ways to build faster and more efficiently in this new, call it AI world. And I think it's going to change the way, as I said, PMs operate, the way engineers operate, the way business folks operate, and it's going to continue to evolve and iterate. But it's not a bad thing. I think actually, for us at least, it seemed like with a smaller team, we're able to get 10x or more efficiency out of our people, where they feel like they're getting so much more done, and they can actually focus on the parts of it that matter, that are important, and make those trade-offs. And so part of that also is flattening the culture. Part of that is hiring more senior people who are experienced, who have good either domain expertise or really good, call it coding expertise, engineering expertise, because you're able to get more leverage out of them and put people closer to the problem.
I love that. I mean, it's interesting because I think when we look at what we're talking about, I mean, part of the SDLC, the process we've seen, the notion of even Scrum might have to start evolving to support the shift in where requirements are further developed, fleshed out before the engineering team even has to decide what, where, how, all those components. And I guess when you start looking at where hires go, I mean, especially when we're talking about, we've been, you can talk about a lot of the tools out there that software engineers use and whether or not you need to hire. I mean, there's a whole junior people, we don't need them. The coding engine's going to do it, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't matter right now. But we're seeing a lot of talk around it. And I guess when you think about technologists and what they do really well, they do solve problems really well. They always just don't have the time to spend in the business. They don't have time to sit with the stakeholder long enough. And when they do, they typically are already thinking about the solution because they know it does take a long time to produce it. And I think there needs to be a shift maybe in the way that the mindset of an engineer is, because they might have to do things differently. I guess when you think about spending more time, especially the insurance industry, a lot of nuances. Do you think if we're seeing the requirement delivery change, we'll see the engineers sit with the business more, spend more time in the business?
That's great. So, I mean, as I said, insurance is really just a big data problem, right? And it actually, although it's a simple product, it's a piece of paper and a promise, and they have to, the customer has to trust us. It's a complex and complicated and regulated industry. And yet, as you said, engineers are really good at solving problems, right? And so I think it's not necessarily junior people won't have jobs. I think plenty of them will. But I think it's going to be people who are sort of logical, methodical thinkers who are going to succeed. And I think one of the things we've already started doing is we call it a sort of a pod structure, where we have in anything we're building an insurance product professional, a technical product manager, and an engineer at a senior level sitting in something that's getting built. And they are from the beginning thinking about what are the requirements, what has to be built, and how do we solve the business problem. So that engineer is getting much closer to the business. And because of the tools, they then don't have to spend as much time building it all out. They can actually spend time thinking about how do we solve this problem, which is what engineers like to do. And then they can go and, once they've kind of scoped that, build it out. And that's a much faster process to build. So they don't have to spend all of their time just building, but actually problem solving. And so we've solved that, I think, or I wouldn't say solved it, but we're working through that in two ways. One is creating a pod structure where we bring the business and the technical people much closer together. And the second way, I think, is something that we borrowed from Basecamp called like pitch bet. And so a lot of work gets scoped in advance by people, and then we kind of pitch it. And then the engineers have something called a fixed outcome variable scope, where we say, here's kind of the outcome we want produced within what we've scoped. And then what gets actually produced there can get changed. And the outcome has to be hit, but how deep or not deep the product actually gets built is determined by the team working on it. And the requirements may change over time of like what exactly gets built. And they do that in a short enough period where they can get something shipped, long enough where it can get shipped, but short enough that if things change and the business changes, that we can obviously from a business perspective continue to adapt.
Fantastic. I guess when we are thinking about the process itself, and we're thinking about the shifts that are coming up, and the one thing that I've asked, I guess, different ways, and I'm always curious, is if we are seeing this shift in delivery models, and it's still going through, and we're going to hopefully see productivity gains. I'm always curious what we're going to do with that productivity, because I guess there's a lot out there. I can't remember the quote, but whatever it is, work tends to consume whatever space we give it, and time we give it. I guess with that productivity, do you have a thought as to what happens? Do we get more done? Do we save money? Is it a combination of the two? I guess what do we do if we're able to do things more productive in delivery of technology? What would you hope is done with that time? Maybe that's a better question.
I think that's right. I think you can get more done more efficiently and better, right? So it used to be you could do something better, faster, or cheaper. I think now with the AI out there and the agentic tools that we have, we can actually do all three. You don't have to just choose two. But I think what I'd love to see happen is actually spending more time on simplifying and making things easy, because you actually have the time to be thoughtful, and then accomplish a lot more in a short period of time. And that's something that we've seen, which is things that maybe used to take a long time, other than the human element of, if you're dealing externally, you have to work with other people, which is great. And different organizations move at different speeds. But I think from an internal perspective, it allows us to move a lot faster and build things that either weren't possible before or may have taken 3, 5, 7 years to build that we can now do in a matter of months or quarters.
I love it, Michael. I appreciate the thoughts and the time and that you've spent with us today. If somebody does have a follow-up question, if somebody wants to learn more, what are good ways of connecting?
Yeah, happy to have them reach out on LinkedIn. That's always a good one. LinkedIn's fantastic. We're continuing to grow and scale our team. We're hiring great engineers, great AI engineers, and so people are interested. LinkedIn's fantastic. I think we also have a hiring at email alias if they want a job. Always welcome to reach out there. And I love connecting with people who are interested in the cross section of AI technology and insurance.
Love it. Thank you for the time again. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Amir.
Absolutely. All right, that's it for this episode. Be back again, different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, I think we learned a lot about insurance is a big data problem. I hadn't thought about it that way, but Michael actually articulated a way that I'm like, yep, that does make sense now. And we talked a little bit about how vibe coding is going to change, is changing delivery, what we're going to do with that time, spending more time in the business. We learned a little bit about MGT itself. So share this episode with somebody else that also might benefit from hearing it. Also like, subscribe, comment, let me know how the show's going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.